at the end of the day, if you want to move on, but do it for the right reasons. I went in knowing this was a big challenge, and it was a challenge above anything else I had done before. The CEO has said to me, Craig, the most important thing in the next 5 to 10 years in our downstream business is going to be IT and what it enables us to do. His very next words were, but of course not you, because your lot are hopeless and way too expensive. I mean McKinsey and IBM. We got the first $500 million out, so I took over in the summer of 2014. We got it out by the end of 2015. And by 2018, we were running $1.2 billion. SAP told me I had the most complex implementation in the world. I think they tell everybody that.
If you are not ashamed of your first release of the product, you are too late.
They never get any thanks. All they get is beaten up because something failed. It's well about time, guys. Yeah? Because if you're not on the same level as these other folks, yet the whole company relies on you doing your job right, not only keeping it safe, but driving it forward and being innovative, you kind of deserve to be at the same level and be given the respect that, that commands.
Welcome to the CIO Diary, where we uncover the human stories behind digital transformation. I'm your host, KK, and today we are joined by Craig Walker, the former Global CIO of Shell. Craig's career is a remarkable one, from starting as a programmer to leading one of the world's largest and most complex IT organizations at Shell. Craig also serves as a chair of the Institute of Coding and as a strategic advisor to organizations ranging from Zinnov to the Great British Railways transition team. His perspective on when to quit, how to return stronger, how to leverage the external experience is something that every IT leader will find it invaluable. Hi, Craig. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you.
Many of the IT leaders today, especially in the current scenario, feel burnt out, feel that they want to quit, and sometimes they even burn the bridges. How do you spot the right time to make the switch?
I finished being a CIO 5 years ago, and I think the job, the stresses of it have only become greater. So not only are we going through an incredible technology change, there's incredible pressures on business from social, geopolitical, geoeconomic situations. And a lot of boards, executives are looking to IT to help them grow the business, to help them reduce costs, to help them automate and do it in a secure way, right? A lot of pressure. So I think as a CIO, you've got to work out how do you enjoy the job before you get burnt out. If you're going to get burnt out, something's wrong. Something's wrong with the culture. Something's wrong with the way you're interacting with senior management, maybe with your team, maybe with the wider business. And I think you have to find a place where you are happy doing the job. And I always say to people, if you're not happy doing the job, it's time to move on, because there's nothing worse than being in a role or reporting to someone where it's really doesn't leave you feeling fulfilled at the end of every day and wanting to go in the next day. I think one of the most important life lessons is treat people how you want to be treated on the way up, because one day you might be on the way down and you'll want to be treated the same way, right? So I think all those things we're taught around leadership of being humble, etc., are all very important. But at the end of the day, if you want to move on, but do it for the right reasons. And in that, I mean, it's very easy to get, I think, fixated on a single thing. Maybe a disruptive person, maybe someone you really don't get on with on the executive team. There are ways to sort that out. And part of leadership is being bold, is confronting issues, is having an appropriate discussion about the things you see that are causing you the stress. On the other hand, if a company is doing things that are not in line with your values, then maybe it's time to move on. There's maybe some companies some of us wouldn't work for because it doesn't sit well with the way we perceive the way we want to live our lives. But ultimately, I say quit for the right reasons. What is it you really want? It's all very well saying, I hate this, I'm going to go do something else. And we've all heard people say that. But what actually are you going to go and do? And one of the things I have done with some of the senior people I mentor is say, why don't you go away and write a list? Get out your favorite bottle of wine or whatever it may be, get rid of the distractions and write down 10 things that you would love about a job? Maybe, I don't know, if you're 35, 45, 55, think of the next significant milestone in your life and say, what are 10 things? It doesn't have to be 10, it could be 6, right? But what are the things that when I'm at that point, I want to have achieved? And be honest with yourself. A lot of people don't like to write, well, I want to have X in the bank account. That's fine. That's fine. That's your personal aspiration. I want to have met the person of my dreams. I don't know. I want to live in this country. Fine. Just write them down. Then I always joke, go show them to your partner. And when they finish laughing, go write them again. Because you're not writing this to show me for my benefit. You're writing it to help you focus. And if you just think about it in your mind, it'll change from day to day. So revisit it a few times and be sure that what you're about to move to is genuinely going to not only make you more fulfilled, happier, it's also going to fit in with your life ambition. Fantastic. And the older you get, the more important I think that can become.
Brilliant.
Or maybe the younger you are, the more important it is. Maybe I'm wrong with that supposition.
You not only served in a single company for the longest, but you went out and did a 6-year training that Shell let you to do it.
Yes.
How was that journey? What did you learn, and how did you come back stronger?
Well, I'd had a fabulous run at Shell. Yeah, I'd been there 17 years. I'd worked in Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Colombia, Aberdeen, Scotland, which I do consider overseas, and many Scots do as well if they come from Glasgow. So I'd had a really rich and fulfilling 17 years with Shell. Never knew when I started out as a programmer the sort of jobs that would start to become available because of the way technology was evolving. Yeah, but I also recognized that I only knew Shell, right? And yes, I was successful at Shell, but I only knew that culture and I knew how to operate in that culture. And Shell, particularly back in those days, was very hierarchical, very organizationally led, very clear in terms of who you reported to and therefore who you should talk to, etc. Okay, maybe because it was set up along military lines 100 odd years ago, right? But that I could operate within. But I realized there was a lot I didn't know. And people might be telling me I was good, but I didn't know whether I was in the outside world. So I decided it was time to move on. And I wanted to learn about other things. So in my little list of things, I wanted to learn about other cultures, about other companies, find out what was going on there and why they were different, and whether Shell was as good as Shell thought it was or not. Because, you tend to work in these big companies and everybody thinks they're fabulous. And there's many fabulous things about them. Please don't get me wrong there. But there's things they could learn from. So I decided, I put my name out there. A couple of headhunters reached out to me and one said, have you thought about KPMG? And my initial reaction was, I'm not an accountant, because I didn't know they were consultants, right? But I met with them. They were very similar in terms of the blue chip approach, the experience, the knowledge, the credibility of people as you would find in Shell. So it felt like a similar move in terms of people, but a very different culture. And it took me a while to adjust to that much flatter culture. I joke it was the best training course they ever let me go on because I really got what I wanted. I worked for a whole lot of different companies at senior exec level, talking to a lot of CIOs, and I learned about the softer skills. So the bit that I didn't have at Shell really was change management, leading without authority, listening perhaps, being curious, understanding what that business was really after, not what I had to sell as a consultant, but what they were really after. Now, I do think if you make that move, it's important you go in at the right level to a company. I went in basically as an associate partner, i.e. a non-equity partner. And at that level, you get exposed to the right things and the right people. I did a magnificent year. It was such good fun down at Airbus. I was in there as their head of IT strategy for a year, and that was a fascinating job, and saw a very different culture there compared to, say, going and doing some work for Virgin or for Sainsbury's or whatever it might be, right? And so after after 4 or 5 years, KPMG was because of the SEC regs and the separation, bought out by Atos Origin, and Shell reapproached me and said, well, you must have done what you said you wanted to do. Would you like to come back? And they offered me the CIO role for downstream business in Africa out of Cape Town. And it was an ideal opportunity to take all that learning, because I'd been having those conversations with CIOs who said, yes, Craig, but there's the politics, it's not as easy as that. And of course, I'm coming in with a mindset that says, well, anything's possible because I'm your advisor. Now I'm going to go do it for myself. So I prefer to say drinking my own champagne rather than eating my own dog food. But it gave me an opportunity to come back and practice it and realize, of course, once you step back into a big company, it's not that easy. But there were a number of things I learnt on my journey that enabled me, I think, to be better than I would have been. I was certainly better than I would have been had I have stayed at Shell. So sometimes I don't regret leaving. That would be wrong. Shell went through a lot of change, including the reserves crisis whilst I was away, and reshaped itself. And I think I came back in an ideal time when we were looking to globalize, we were looking to really change the way IT operated, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a good time to come back, and it was a good time to put those skills into practice.
If you take that 6 years and distill down to, if there is one big takeaway, of course, so much learning. You got an opportunity to work across the industry, talking to Airbus, from all type of industries and so on. What is one of the biggest takeaway?
I think it's have the honest conversation. Because I think what you learn as a consultant is people are paying you to give them your best advice, and they might not like that advice. And that's fine. If they don't like it, well, they don't have to pay you anymore and they'll tell you to go away. But at least you can sit there and say, look, listening to what you say, I really think at the heart of this, or whatever it is, you come back into the corporate environment and you realize again, not everybody wants to hear that. A lot of big companies, many companies, are very good at sugarcoating the message. Mm-hmm. And I think it made me speak my mind more. I still had to practice that because that's never easy. Go in and confront issues, never easy. I mean, at least I knew what I should be doing, and sometimes I left it too long. But there were a number of occasions where I knew somebody senior to me, for whatever reason, we got off on the wrong foot or they didn't like something, and I would book time with them. And I think a little bit to their surprise, I would sit down. It was harder to get people in a social situation than it was when I first joined Shell. The way of working had changed. But I'd sit down with them in office and say, look, Dave or Mary or whatever, I feel like something isn't right here. I feel like I've done something to upset you, or I've not done something that you expected me to do. Could we have a talk about it? And I would say 99 times out of 100, people get it off their chest. You realize it 99 times out of 100, it was a mistaken understanding, or I thought you wanted this, or you thought I was good, and you sort it out. I think the worst thing you can do in both your personal and professional life is to let things fester. Because if you do, it only gets worse, and then it really goes downhill. And then you avoid each other, all the things that people do because we feel uncomfortable confronting issues.
Brilliant. So listening and being honest. Interestingly, when you mentioned about this, leading without authority caught my attention very much, because I've seen many CIOs, data is not part of my team, there is a gap, cybersecurity is not part of my team, there is a gap, but leading without authority is very difficult, and yes. I think you have written about it and spoke about it as well. Love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, when you work in any company, normally there's a clear chain of command, which people, as we've already said, get upset if you step outside of. Yeah. So leading without authority to me is what I had to learn at KPMG. You think of the Airbus job. I'm put into a massive company working in France in Toulouse. I have French, English, Germans in that team, and I'm supposed to create their next 3-5 year IT strategy. Why should anybody do anything for me? I'm this hired help because they can't find anyone internally. I'm this Brit that's flying in every week to Toulouse to help build this thing. And I have to learn how to bring that team along with me, even though in some respects, I can't tell them what to do. So I think you learn a lot about motivating people, a lot about how you, again, back to listening and then bring people onto your side. Not always your viewpoint. You may change your viewpoint because of things you say. So I'm not saying you're there to persuade them that you're right, but you are there to lead them. And you have to gain trust and credibility to do that. And those are not easy things to do. But as any consultant knows, if you walk in from them, it's always, isn't it, the first 2 minutes, people sort of suss you out. Okay, so consultancy teaches you to go in and use your mannerisms, your way of speaking, your humbleness, whatever it might be, to get people's trust. And then you have time to build your credibility because you can show you understand data or cyber or infrastructure, whatever it is you're talking about. You have a solid foundation on that. You might not know all the stuff, but I always say to people, don't be afraid to say, I don't know that. That's fine. In fact, that's probably the best answer if you don't, because that hurts your credibility and your trust if you try and bluff your way through something. Be honest. But then you can start to lead with that authority because people respect you.
So you
makes sense.
Be honest, listen to them, and then automatically you build that credibility to leading them without authority.
But there's a wonderful equation I quote quite often, which is the trust equation. And I don't know whether you've ever seen that. Trust equals reliability plus credibility plus intimacy divided by self-orientation.
Fantastic.
So the more I talk about myself, the more I lessen the other three. And this is part of a leadership talk I give, so I won't spend too much time on your podcast, but basically, being credible, there's a whole bunch of things that help you be credible. Being a reliable, delivering what you say you're going to deliver, turning up when you say you're going to do it, no surprises when you're around, that sort of thing. The one we're not good at, I think, as Brits maybe, is the intimacy one, right? I shouldn't be afraid to have a conversation with you within the bounds of what we can talk about. I should remember that your son's about to do this, or the last time you talked to me, your wife and yourself were off on a holiday. I should show interest in you. True. If you're down, I should say, hey, KK, something wrong? You don't have to talk to me about it, but if you want to, please do. That's part of leadership, is understanding people. And quite often we miss that one out. I often said to people, when I took over the final Global CIO job and I met the new CEO, who amazingly had started Shell the same day as me, and he had taken over about a month before me, name of John Abbott. And I went in to see John. And the first time I went in to see him, I think he probably thought I'd book half an hour on an hour. I'm the new CIO. I'd come on with loads of slides. None of that. And I was taught this by somebody many years earlier. I just wanted to go in and have a conversation. So I went in with nothing. I came out with everything. We spent 15 minutes. I found out his son was a fitness coach for one of the Premier League sides. He loves to cycle. His wife does this. And we had a conversation, where have we both worked in the world? Oh, that's amazing. I just missed you there and I was here. And he kind of talked about his career and we got to know each other. It's important you get to know people. That's what we used to do in big companies. Absolutely. When I joined Shell, for goodness sake, we all sat down to lunch together because they had beautiful canteens. They even had bars that were open at lunchtime and in the evening. We used to socialize together. And you'd go to the bar and you'd meet someone many steps in the organization higher than you, and you'd have a conversation with them and learn something. All that went away. So I think we have to work even harder, not in a creepy way, I know you have to be careful these days, but you should get to know the people who work for you because you depend on them.
Absolutely. You also not only brought the cost down significantly. In some places you have quoted as close as 45% of the cost down. And you still delivered value worth billions with B. How did you achieve it?
Each of those CIO jobs after I went back to Shell following the KPMG days, they basically handed me something that was a problem, told me it was a problem and said, you need to go sort it out. And it's not just you need to go sort out the IT. We are also repositioning the business in some way. Yeah, and that was true of the Africa situation. It was very much true of trading and supply shipping. And then it was an even bigger challenge when it came to the downstream. I think, I went in knowing there was a problem. I went in knowing this was a big challenge, and it was a challenge above anything else I had done before. Mm-hmm. And I think by then I had learnt you've got to have done a certain amount of pre-work before you go in, and you've got to have the right tools in terms of your management style, etc. And I was still learning, and I made mistakes. Mm-hmm. But get around you the team that stands a chance of doing this. Now, I think, a number of times in my career, you go into a situation and you're not tough enough early enough. I've rarely moved someone out of a job when I've had a proper conversation with them, etc., that they haven't at some stage come back and said, actually, I'm happier doing what I am now, whether it was somewhere else in the company, whether they chose to leave the company, right? But you've got to get a team around you that aspires to the vision you're starting to paint. So you've come in and said, look, this is a problem. We're not delivering what the business wants. The business sees us as a service. Yeah. Meanwhile, the CEO has said to me, Craig, the most important thing in the next 5 to 10 years in our downstream business is going to be IT and what it enables us to do. His very next words were, but of course not you, because your lot are hopeless and way too expensive. I mean, McKinsey and IBM, right? Well, okay, thanks for that kick. But that was the challenge.
I've heard this. I've heard people always, when they want to do a big innovation, they go out and find consultants to come and do. They don't.
Yeah, because we didn't have trust or credibility from the business. So we had to find a way to do that. I was handed a $2.5 billion budget.
Wow.
And I took one look at that and said, this is madness. Mm-hmm. And when I said to the CEO after our initial meeting and a few meetings later, this budget's crazy, I could see the look on his face of, oh my God, he wants more money. And I went, no, this is craziness. There are so many things that are not working properly. And we need to sort that out. So way too much was being run by third parties. Okay, we'd outsourced data centers, comms, telecoms and desktop, and that's fine. So let's look at what we need to do. Let's get the right skills back in-house, which led us to building the Bangalore Global Competence Center. We went from 0 to 4,000 people in 4 years out there.
Especially when you had such a huge scale.
Yes. Well, because we had gone the outsourcing, the managed services, the shared services routes with third parties, but some of the contracts were ill thought through. We had one contract around our support of SAP, which basically paid every time they sorted out a user problem. They didn't fix the root cause. They just kept sorting out the user problem. Right? Why would they do any different? That's what the contract basically told them to do. They had no incentive to sort the root problem. Okay, we need to sort that out. So it was a combination of people, of governance and the way we were running things, and then getting close to the business. Right? Because one of the things that happens, when you take over as a new CIO, you get a number of people turn up at your door. Many people turn up at your door. They want to tell you what they're doing, and great, and that's fabulous, and they're excited about it, and they're fired up about it, and they taught me through their project. And always at the end, I would say to them, so, great stuff, and I can ask some techie questions because I've come up through the ranks. By the way, how's your part of the business doing this year? And I would say 99% of people, when I first took over, looked at me and went, oh, Craig, I'm IT, I'm not the business. Aha, so we have a problem here. You don't know how I don't know, retail's doing, or lubricants or aviation, whatever it is you're working on. So you don't know their challenges. You don't know the opportunities. You don't know what's going on in the marketplace. Have you been out there, by the way? When was the last time you went to a terminal? Or you've been out with a truck driver or a salesperson, or you've been to a distribution depot and seen how it really works? I haven't done that. Okay. Well, from now on, that's what we're going to do. Because if you don't go and work on the front line, you have no idea how good, bad, or indifferent these things are. You know, and I hear it from colleagues. You know, a friend who just took over, one of the first things she had to do as CFO was go walk the job with the people who were actually doing the job.
Yeah.
And there's 70,000 of them in this case doing the job. I won't give the name away because that's a little unfair. But she had to go out there and do the job with them. Yeah, because if you don't, how on earth can you be effective? And it was very interesting because quite quickly I got feedback from senior people in the business. They'd stop me in the car and go, okay, great, a couple of your people came out to our depot. Thanks for that. You know, they solved a few problems we've had for years. Or they did this. Fantastic. And we started to grow the credibility. Now, this is a much bigger story, right? Because obviously we were running thousands of applications. We were running tens of platforms. We had to cut all that down, decide what ones we were going to go for. Skill up in the future, start to put the old skills out to managed services, and be honest and say we're probably going to shut that down in 2 years. So if you want to take it on, that's fine. They could often do it because they were running 30 of those systems for other people, right? You know, all of that worked. If my people want to reskill, I'll reskill you in the latest stuff that we're going to be running. What happened at the end of it was I'd actually said I think the team and I went back and said we'll get $500 million out by 2017. We got the first $500 million out, so I took over in the summer of 2014. We got it out by the end of 2015. And by 2018, we were running for 1.3 billion less.
Wow.
1.2 billion less. We got it down to 1.3. We were more effective. We were more efficient. Instead of spending 80+% on run and maintain, we were spending 60. And so that was enabling us to not only take out money, but put more money back into the new stuff, which was going to drive the business forward.
Fabulous.
Now, I won't go through all we had to come up with the right architecture to do this and all sorts of things. But you've got to have a vision. And you've got to sell that vision. And, you know, our front words were commerciality, one team results. I had it painted on walls and all sorts of things. Commerciality, one team results. And I said for the
commerciality, one
team results.
Okay.
And however long I'm in charge, and it ended up being 6 years, everything we talk about as a leadership team, you should somehow bring that in. So you always tie it back to that. You know, commerciality is this going to help us make money, the business? Is this going to do something for the customer? Is this going to do something for our supply chain? Because if it doesn't, why are we doing it? One team, by the time I leave, I don't want to see any difference between the business and us. It's not us and them. And when I first arrived, not a single person was on a leadership team. By the time I left, all of my team were, and then my role got put onto the top team as well. That was for my successor. It was my parting gift to him.
Fantastic.
You know, that's what makes the difference. And results is business results. I'm going to partly reward how we've done, not just on whether you've delivered what you've delivered, but how did the business do? Because that's really important to us.
Absolutely.
So
identifying the right use cases and so on. So when so many changes happening, how did you manage when you were running IT also? There were so many changes happening. How did you manage to adopt the new technologies, but at the same time, keeping the lights on? And especially you touched upon, of course, it may not be AI, but client server was quite popular and SaaSification was quite high. Yes. How did you manage to, you got to reduce your cost, you need to keep people upskilled, keep people happy, and then adopt new technologies, and especially in such a large enterprise. How did you manage to do that?
Well, you have to start out by deciding what's the future in terms of the applications you're running, and what are you going to retire. And everybody has their favorites, and you're going to have to make some compromises, and you're going to have to get the business on your side, because you have to decide what are those future solutions. And you obviously don't know all of them because other things are coming out, and you've got to be flexible. But let's just say, to make it simple, you're running, SAP as your main ERP. You've got maybe some ServiceNow, you've got Salesforce, you've got Microsoft Office, you probably have some integration tools. You have Oracle behind a lot of it. You're moving to Azure. You're moving to AWS, and you paint a picture of what the future landscape is going to be. Now, I say you have to have the business behind you because in the cost reduction piece, I went to the business and said, right, my predecessors seem to have hidden all the costs from you. I'm going to show you everything because actually we don't do anything that you don't ask for, say you need or want or hopefully use. And of course, we'd go through it and find application whatever costing $250,000 a year, only ever signed onto once or twice a year. And you'd show it to that department. They go, well, geez, one of those guys left about 5 years ago. Let's go talk to the other guy. Oh, well, yeah, I suppose I don't really use. Okay, gone. Right. So, but there was a lot of shutting down of things that we could see weren't touched and then see who got upset about it. Now, once you decide where you're going, your architects become king, right? I think data architects, solution architects, whatever architects, they have to be given the power to say, if it doesn't fit my box and I ain't signing it off, you're not doing it. And by the way, we've still got all this stuff that isn't in the box. So what are we going to do about that? Because if you don't cut down the number of applications, and we took out thousands, wow. I think we went from 2,500. It depends what you call an application, of course, down to around 900. My successor got the number down even further. Well done.
2,500 to 900. Wow.
Yeah. And we were running many, many platforms. We had every integration tool going. Informatica, MuleSoft, file transfer protocol, you name it, we had it. Well, you can't support all of that. No wonder we had all these third parties. If I'm going to upskill people in, okay, maybe one or two tools, you'll never get rid of everything. Let's decide what they are. And then we have to make a conscious decision on the skilling. Now, the real issue is, go back to me meeting John. Here's the new CEO, has great ambitions for the business. We're going to bring businesses together. We're going to restructure. We're going to process things, and I can't say to him, give me some money and I'll go sort out the past. Oh, and in 3 years' time, I'll be able to do some really cool stuff for you. I've basically got to be able to do two things at once. I've got to be able to, I called it reform and transform. I've got to reform the past. I've got to get rid of stuff. I've got to sort out apps that are the most customized, ridiculous mess you've ever seen and get them right. Oh, and I've got to build the future, because they're not, if I don't do it, we know what happens. The business goes and hires a bunch of consultants to do it. And then they go, well, look, we've built this. And you go, well, I can't run that. And it's not secure. And all those problems. You also have people back in the day, and I've seen this many times in companies, hard coding usernames and passwords into spreadsheets to pull data to run their own numbers. Oh, and by the way, those numbers didn't agree with their colleague because they used something slightly different, or there's an error in the spreadsheet. All that had to go. That's a security problem. That's a GDPR problem. That's a God knows what problem, right? So we had an amnesty. We actually had an amnesty. Everybody had to hold up their hand and go, I'm running something I shouldn't. All of that had to be either shut down because it was really, no, I'm sorry, that's about to be against the law. GDPR was about to come in. Or, yes, we can rewrite that for you. Or, actually, a report already exists for that. Oh, well, I don't think that report's right. Okay, well, let's get the report right. We've got to stop this constant, I'm doing my own thing, because a lot of it was about adoption. So, sorry, back to the story. And I know you know my other three words, shrink, simplify, sustain.
Yes.
Once we decide what those big platforms are, let's get after the mess. So a very good friend and colleague of mine who worked for me several times over my career, he said, I put him in charge of sorting out SAP. Now, SAP told me I had the most complex implementation in the world. I think they tell everybody that, partly because they want you to go to S4HANA right at the time. We were on ECC6. And I said, no, we're going to sort out, I'm not going to replicate this mess, right? There's a lot of good tools on the market. I think, and I don't remember all the names about SAP now, but there were 30,000 user exits, all right, 15,000, of which 90% had never even been used, but they've been coded in. Right. They haven't been used in 15 years. Get rid of them. We hadn't got all the latest patches in because it took us about a year to test the damn thing because it was so customized. Things would fall over every time we put a new patch in, and a lot of that was security patches.
Wow.
So what this guy did and his team was basically strip out the mess because it was taking us a year to get something in, as I said, because of all the testing. By the time he'd finished, not only he got the cost down by about 40% of running it, we'd got the reliability up, and we were doing releases every quarter, every month, and we could even do them every week if it was an emergency. People in the business started to like SAP. This was quite scary, right? Because it was actually changes they wanted were going in quickly. Therefore, that's helping the business. It's helping the end, the end customer. They started to trust the data more because we started to sort out the oodles of business warehouses that had been built around it, and we tidied the thing up.
Mm-hmm.
But that takes time. That was a 2-year journey, but we got there. So reforming was about sorting out the back end. Transforming is I'm going to do the clever stuff on the front. We were starting to bring in Salesforce. Certain data comes from the back end. Certain data is input at the time. It's got to be cross-validated. Let's not start building crazy file whatevers. We are going to use APIs. We're going to decide on our API system, and that's what we're going to do. Now, I know I simplify this, and any CIO listening to this is going to go, yeah, Craig, you're simplifying this. But basically, you're building the adapters. And once I've built that, I can start to change things on the back end. And as long as my adapter switches at the same time I switch it, the people running the fancy new stuff on the front end on their mobile or whatever device they're using, they don't see the difference.
True.
So that was how the architecture had to work. We had to go reform, transform, and sort out the middle. Now, the middle was an absolute nightmare. And it took time. And by the time I left, clearly we hadn't finished that journey.
Wow.
I'm sure the journey's still going on. But you've got to get certain principles sorted out, and then you go on the march. And back to one of your earlier questions, you go on with the march with the people who believe in what you're trying to do. If that means you have to make some tough decisions, you make those tough
decisions and call them.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think you also mentioned on this note, I don't want PowerPoints.
Well, yeah, because, as you move into a SaaS world, as we were, we were implementing Salesforce and other big SaaS products. Why have you spent a load of money with consultants to give me a load of PowerPoints to tell me what you want to do? I always kept a bit of a budget there. Because let's face it, that budget was so big, there was always some money somewhere. Where if someone came into my office, it upset my finance manager no end. And they'd say, look, I want to go try this. I think this could really work for these folks. We want to roll out this mobile app for 10 people at this operations center and let's see if it works. Or fine. Well, what's it going to cost? And it would be $10,000 or something. But when you really looked at it, it was maybe $5,000 going out the door and $5,000 was for manpower. Right, go do it. But before you do it, I ask 2 things. You give me some criteria for why it's successful, if it's going to be. And if it fails, if it doesn't deliver, and I don't like the word failure, but if it doesn't deliver, you come back to the management team and tell us why it went wrong, because that's the learning. The real learning is when it doesn't go right.
That is true. But
there has to be some governance and guidelines, because if you go off and buy whatever software and we can't possibly scale it or it's not secure, you've got a problem. And part of that previous story was making everything more secure and more reliable. So the money didn't only come out, but we upped the game on everything. So I don't want to start introducing more problems, but let's experiment. Let's be innovative and creative.
True. So that's why you said, I don't want PowerPoints.
Correct.
I want prototypes.
Correct.
So what were some of the success stories?
We tried a lot of things, didn't take off. They couldn't scale, or the adoptability didn't really work. I know where it goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So in one instance, we were, the business was very keen, as a lot are, to build a mobile app, right, to in our case for the retail service stations. And the first version of that, we didn't really prototype. We built the thing and we put everything in it that everybody wanted. From marketing to sales this thing was so functionally rich, it was ridiculous. And it cost a lot of money and it took a lot of time. I would say 12 months later, we stripped 80% of it out, because all the public bothered doing was they wanted to pay on their phone. And remember, this is about 2016, so that was relatively new. Pay on their phone, collect their loyalty points, use their loyalty points, and know if their local station was open or where it was.
Where it
right?
is, yeah.
That's what they cared about. All this other stuff we put on it, they couldn't. And I wish we'd prototyped it, really prototyped it. Gone out there with a select bunch of customers or in a select area and really tried it. And we didn't. We believed our own hype internally. Oh, wow, we know what people want, and this is going to be mind-blowing when they get it. Well, the only thing they really fed back was this is too complex. I only want these 3 things.
Wow.
So prototyping, I don't think we do enough. Mm-hmm. And I'm always impressed with the way the big tech companies, Apple, particularly on the consumer side. Mm-hmm. You're wearing your Meta glasses, your Ray-Ban Meta glasses, which I also have, and I think they probably are my favorite gadget at the moment. I have great fun with them. But they could have waited for version 2 to give us the little heads-up display as well.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They went out with something that, as I remember when I got it about a year ago, it only connected to a few things on my phone. But slowly but gradually, they introduced more.
True.
And, they asked for feedback, etc. That's the way you do it.
True.
You don't... Yeah. The other one, there's that wonderful cartoon, isn't there, of somebody building a car. And if it's a multinational, they'll try and build the engine and the wheels and the chassis, and you'll wait years before they manage to put it all together. An innovative company builds a scooter first, which you just propel with your legs, and then they work out a bicycle, and they move to a bicycle, and then they put a motor on it, and then so you get value from day one instead of waiting 2 years to get some value.
Absolutely.
I think the big companies, because we're full of engineers, strive for perfection straight off. You've got to get out of that mindset.
True. And very interesting 2 points. The LinkedIn founder and CEO once famously said, if you are not ashamed of your first release of the product, you are too late.
Yeah. Yes.
And so true. Just a few days before, Meta released the new version of the glasses. And Mark Zuckerberg was there on the stage. Utter flop. The entire demo was trying to give 2 biggest innovation in the product, and both the demos failed miserably. It is one live AI, and the second one is video calling.
Yes.
But that's how you release, and you shouldn't be feeling ashamed of, and that gives you the push, and it's also about the controlled innovation.
Yes, it is. You do have to have some controls around it, or you will waste a lot of money.
Exactly.
I fear at the moment with AI, a lot of CIOs I talk to in some of the roles I'm doing now, there's a lot of pushing Copilot out there, etc. These are not cheap tools ultimately, and yes, some people are learning how to use them and probably using them quite well. But I think you're going to have the devil's only job working out what value, bottom line value, benefit you are really getting from this.
Absolutely.
Because you're not going to replace anyone's job. You're going to be charged quite a hefty license fee. Are people just going to go home earlier? Are the notes actually going to be any better? I mean, how are you going to measure the success of these? And it's early days. I get that. We're in a hype cycle. But always, I kept saying to my folks, bring it back to the business benefit. Whatever you're in, if your customer doesn't see a benefit because we're doing X, then why are we doing it? And that might be because the supply chain's smoother, the product is cheaper, we get innovations in faster, they get better customer service. I don't know what it is. But there are many things, even in the back office, that go on. It might be invoicing, where we get more accurate invoices. That's good. The customer will see that. They will appreciate us more. They'll stay. There's more chance they'll stay with us. So always bring it back to your end customer.
True.
And I think with the sort of people who are wearing the Meta glasses, right, we're up for a bit of innovation. It's fun to wear them. Not everything works all the time. They glitch occasionally, but when they do work, it's absolutely magnificent. And I'm happy to put up with that because there's more upside to it to me. We're not in, a lot of stuff people do, it's not critical. It's not life-threatening. Now there's areas in safety, obviously, particularly in any big company where you've got to get it right. But there's a lot of areas where perfection is not necessary to start off with. And I know I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So I had to suppress that in myself when going out with an early version. But quite often the business response is, well, this isn't good enough, Craig. This isn't really what I asked for, and I'd like it in blue anyway. Why is it in? No. Just try it. Tell me. Don't forget it hasn't got the company logo on it. Just try it. Tell me if it makes any difference to your daily work. Does it make you any more money? Does it hit your KPIs? If it doesn't, we're probably doing the wrong thing, and we should kill it now.
And you spoke about AI. Maybe a good spot to ask, what is your favorite AI tool these days?
Well, I suppose in the work I do these days, where I do quite a lot of research into trends and what's going on, I guess it's ChatGPT, Gemini AI, etc. I think I was actually talking to a friend of mine who's a professor at a university yesterday. It's part of a board I chair, and he was saying the latest Gemini AI to him is a big breakthrough, because it not only tells him what sources it's gone through to give him the view or the précis it's now giving him, but he can actually then tell it to ignore certain ones because he knows they're, as he put it, from the less than reputable sources. So I can actually, now that's starting now to become useful. Rather than it just telling me, answering my question, it's not only giving me an audit, but it's allowing me to also select. I suppose there's a risk I'll select, therefore, the views that agree with me. But at least I'm making a conscious decision about where the sources are. Wow. And in the sort of job he's in, he's eminently qualified to do that. So I think AI, it's still on the up hype cycle, but it is starting to become, interestingly, a part of a lot of people's everyday lives.
Absolutely.
And I think part of the issue now is helping the general member of the public, not just the general member of a company, understand and learn how to use these tools, because it will benefit them in their everyday lives.
True. So how do companies can adopt new by the way, Gemini is also my favorite for doing research.
Right.
But quick answers, ChatGPT, but research is like, I want to know more about Craig, then my research is on Gemini.
Oh, that's scary.
It does a pretty good job. I mean, starting days we used to Google by the name and then title, and then say there are so many Craig Walkers, but I think from the context what you're saying, this could be there.
Yes.
And then you pump them into notebook and NLM.
Yes.
That is another different level.
Indeed. And there's a couple of my colleagues who are associate partners in the consultancy who are very skilled at that.
Very nice.
And what they've been teaching me and how to use it is like, wow, okay. The whole way of doing a proposal for clients, etc., is radically changing. True. Because you can do some very nice things that get your point across, get your view across in a much more digestible manner, I think.
Absolutely. And this reminds me also the other point, I'll take back on the prototypes, then the PowerPoints.
Yes.
Today, building the prototype is faster than building the PowerPoints in the past.
Absolutely.
With the vibe coding, with a single prompt, you could build an entire app, at least a prototype model. And have you tried any of them?
I admit I haven't. I haven't programmed for a long time.
Amazing. Especially when you started your career with COBOL.
Yes. Marvelous language. Actually started out on Fortran, I think, was the first thing I coded on.
COBOL is the reason why I left programming long back.
It's a very structured language. Even the full stops are vital. I think the interesting bit about this is, or my worry, is, are people going to be grounded in the basics of their trade? So you look at AI in the legal profession, where you're basically replacing the graduates, the paralegals, with something that can search through thousands of case documents incredibly quickly instead of the weeks it would take them, pull out the whatever you're interested in. I know there's been some real failures on that because it has hallucinated cases that didn't exist and lawyers have got in trouble. But essentially, A pyramid that used to be like this is in danger of going like this.
True.
And I think that's going to create possibly two problems. One is, how the hell does it support this partnership model that the consultancies and many other professions have? But at the bottom layer, how are people going to learn their trade?
True.
If I haven't sat down and gone through lots of cases and thought about it and understood it,
how are you going to make that argument?
Well, yeah, how am I going to, workforce planning and careers and knowledge acquisition and experience that we all went through, how is that going to change? And what effect is this going to have on society, government, our expectations of work, our expectations of a career? I mean, you talk to me, and I'm probably not the last of, but certainly towards the end of the generations who joined a big company and stayed there for 30 years, right? Now, we had all the big company perks. We had the final salary pensions, all of those things. When I got an acceptance letter from Shell, my dad was over the moon. Brilliant, son. Gold watch in 40 years' time, you've made it. One of the best companies in the world. Nowadays, there isn't the same loyalty because there isn't the same loyalty from the company, so there's not the same loyalty from the employees. So where are you going to get that start? Those big companies spent a lot of money training us, and then the consultancies stole a lot of people because they knew the big companies had trained them well.
True. How's
this going to work now? And it's no good thinking about it in 5 years' time. I mean, I'm on, I'm obviously where I live's close to government, but I've been involved in a couple of boards there, and they talk about, well, we'll have a paper in 3-4 years' time. No, we should have had it 5 years ago. How are we, because you're going way back into the school system and saying, what skills do I need that anybody needs just to be a member of society, let alone to be a productive member of the workforce and achieve their life ambition? I think we leave a lot of people behind these days. And it's interesting, as I don't know, the NHS goes to the web. We've all got our NHS app and it all works really nicely. The biggest problem they've got is adoption, because a lot of people may not have a proper internet connection. They don't understand. They don't even understand how to set up a password. But I don't know whether you remember, the government did a 20 questions for whether you were digitally ready.
Ready, yes.
And a large amount of their sample, there were an awful lot of things they couldn't do. I couldn't live without my banking app. But if I ever have to go to the bank, there's a queue of people asking for things that you're like, wow, you could have just done that on the app, but they don't have the app. Apparently, according to the banks, they also, which is quite sad, they have a lot of people go in, particularly elderly people who are living alone, just because it's someone to talk to, right?
That is true.
So you can't get rid of that personal interaction. It plays an important part in society. But somebody said to me the other day, if I had a kid today of 14, 15, and they asked, what should I be studying? I'm not sure I have a good answer. I'm not sure I ever had a good answer, but I'm not sure I have a good answer now. What would I say? What skills should you be getting? Because I don't even think the school system is necessarily set up to give them those skills. Let's face it, this AI revolution is moving so fast that for professionals like us, it's hard enough to keep up. If you're a teacher teaching computer science or technology, how the hell do you keep up with it? Some of the kids are probably ahead of you. I mean, people say we've been through a number of industrial revolutions. And those industrial revolutions maybe took 100 years to play out. The agricultural revolution, 1,000 years to play out. This is taking months, years. It certainly isn't, yes, I saw a lot of change in my IT career. PCs, laptops, client server, internet, mobiles. But it took the best part of 40 years from, that's untrue, let's say 30 years when I started, through to, so let's say 81 I started, 2011, the iPhone had been out about 3-4 years by then, and it was starting to really change the way things were. And then we got faster mobile networks, et cetera, et cetera. That's quite a long revolution. This struck in 2022 when the first ChatGPT came out. Now, let's be honest. I also have to say, AI has been around for years. We had AI in
absolutely.
the 70s. We had neural networks in the algorithms and all that sort of thing is not anything a lot of us, it's not that new to us. But this ability And because of the sheer data storage, the power of the chips, all of this stuff is going way beyond anything we've experienced in the past.
Absolutely.
This is going to move so fast and could fundamentally alter society in ways I don't think we've even thought about.
Yeah.
Or that's unfair. People have thought about it, but how the hell do we respond to it and move a population such that AI isn't seen as a threat? It's seen as one of the biggest benefits for mankind. Because let's face it, since the first person managed to light a fire or make a spear, as humans, we've looked at tools to make our lives better, simpler, faster, easier. But this one is coming at us really fast and could have some fundamental changes. And then people talk about responsible AI. I'm not sure what that really means. What is responsible AI? Because I think that depends an awful lot
to the humans,
on you personally as to what you think is a responsible use or not.
You talked about so much on transformation. What is that one tech move that you are proud of?
It wasn't so much the technology, right? Because I believe it doesn't, and I'll get shot by certain people, but it doesn't matter what SaaS platform you necessarily pick or what solution you pick. There are many very good solutions out there. Mm-hmm. Your data will be an issue, but we know you can sort that, and you may want to redefine your processes. Taking people on a journey from A to B and working in a different way is very hard. And I think there are two things I'm kind of proud of. One was I had quite a small change management team, but we went on a journey with our own people of teaching them, helping them reimagine how to be business people first who happen to have an IT bag, right? Just like the best finance people are business people. Why does the CFO sit next to the CEO at shareholder meetings? Because they understand those numbers back to front. And that means they understand in deep depth how the company's performing, how it's performing against other companies. What are the underlying fundamentals of that performance? What are the risks out there in the marketplace in terms of inflation? They understand that. As a technology person, I should have all that in my kit bag as well. But I'm talking about the business in what I'm talking about. And we actually ran a whole series of workshops. We went around the world, Singapore, Houston, London, The Hague, and Bangalore. And we hired a brilliant company who used actors who probably weren't employed at the time in the West End. And we used to role play. Here's what a typical IT person going into the business these days looks like. And people in the room would sit there and go, God, that's what I do. Oh, that is so bad, isn't it, when I look at it like this? And then we'd role play. They would act out. So how about if you try and do this? How about if you approach with this? And a lot of workshopping around getting people to think differently. And we did it across the whole of IT. We did it for everybody, not just downstream, I think, in the end. And that really made a difference. Now, it was trying to change the culture, right? Because at the end of the day, it's that culture embedded with organization that drives the success. And if you don't address the people, it doesn't work. I remember one of my ex-colleagues famously bumping into me at an event, and he said, do you remember meeting me at the airport? And I was so proud to tell you about my project. And you listened, and you were very complimentary. And then you said, by the way, how much money have you put in for change management? And he said, I kind of bumbled the answer. And you said to me, well, if there's not at least 30% in there for change management, given what you're trying to do, I'm not going to sign it off. I said, that was a bit harsh of me, wasn't it? He said, yeah, but it was kind of true. We ended up spending 20% of the budget because we were trying to move salespeople to work a different way. And you put in something like Salesforce. It's a great tool if it's used properly. If you don't use it properly, quite frankly, you're wasting your money. If you just put in the contacts in, you might as well use Outlook. If all the salespeople still use their spreadsheets and their PowerPoints in the weekly meeting, it's a waste of time. So you've got to get a change from the top. You've got to convince the territory manager or the product manager, whatever. When you have your sales meeting, you are from now on going to call up Salesforce and you're going to look at the opportunities, blah, blah, blah. Of course, what we found was salespeople were only putting in there what they were winning.
Absolutely.
Right? Because they didn't want to show what they weren't winning. But you don't learn anything from the ones you win. You learn from the ones you don't.
Absolutely.
And by the way, that really messes up the pipeline. production pipeline, the supply chain. Because if I don't know what you might win, I'm not necessarily manufacturing the right things. I'm taking incorrect information. If someone comes in and opens up their spreadsheet, their PowerPoint, gone. No, I'm not interested. Let's look at the system. Oh, well, I haven't. Well, you're going to update it. Because by the way, this is how I'm marking you. This is how I'm rewarding you. It took time, but after a while, they started to become a team because they would start to share information with each other around, well, yeah, I got stuck on the legalese with this. Oh yeah, I got stuck with that. Let me tell you what I said to them. They started to work as a team and not just as a bunch of lone wolves who thought they were all the best salespeople. That spilt back into the manufacturing. We then started to see a more smoother supply chain. Because if somebody suddenly sells particular brands of lubricants and we have to ship them in from another country or something, it hurts the margin. Absolutely. It probably hurts the delivery time to the customer. But you knew about this sale. You knew it was an 80% chance. Oh, but I didn't. No, okay. Well, now we're going to change the way we bonus you. That obviously wasn't my decision. But in one company, this wasn't Shell, they changed the way they bonus them. You get 50% of your, bonus on the sale, but the other 50% is when the first invoice is paid. So if you just sell it and walk away without giving a damn about whether we can fulfill, you're not going to get the full reward. So you have to think through how are you going to, because behavior's the problem. The number of things that don't get adopted is shocking. The amount of money that's wasted in technology solutions because we don't follow through by showing people why it's better for them in the long term, why it's safer, why it's more productive, why it makes their lives easier. Yeah, I had this expression, unlock, analyze, act, right? If I can unlock the data for you to, and then I analyze it, I don't just give you a spreadsheet with a bunch of data, a report with a bunch of data. I'm using AI tools or whatever to analyze it. So I say, KK, here's your morning report that says these are this is happening in the customer area. This is happening with here's some challenges from the opposition. These are the key things for you today. I'm giving you something to act on in the moment you need it. I'm not giving you a monthly report, which is, I tell you something happened 3 weeks ago. Well, that's no bloody good. It's about now. So unlock, analyze, act. And if you can do that, you will change the way the business works.
So we call it as actionable insights.
Indeed. Of course. Actionable insights.
Talking about Salesforce, you went on advising the CEO's office at Salesforce, and you would have had an opportunity to talk to many CIOs. It's not just your, experience and talking to. What is one thing that you have seen as a pattern, common? What are the kind of challenges?
It doesn't matter what size company you are. Mm-hmm. It's the same challenges. So one of the things, part of my role was to get Salesforce in at the right level, at the exec level, based on my reputation and my knowledge and experience. Yeah. And so quite often when we did big events for customers, the sales team were very keen to get along as many of the exec suite as they could. So they'd say, well, we've got a former global CIO from Shell coming along, and he'll talk to you about his journey. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what I'm talking about today fulfilled about a 45-minute presentation. I would talk about why Shell had to change as a business and why that is so difficult. Why IT had to change to be something fundamentally different than it was. Why is that so difficult? And here are some of the things, for those of you more technically minded, that we did. And I talk a little bit about the architecture and the APIs and setting up a global competence center to sort of drive it. And it was funny because there were a number of occasions the CEO or whoever would say, but Craig, you're from Shell. We're so-and-so. We're a wholly different scale. I don't see how this will be relevant. And I'd say, that's fine. I'm not here to critique you. I'm just going to tell you my story and take from it what you wish. And I swear, and I'd wait for the grins from around the room, right? It would take no more than 5 minutes before someone on their team went, oh God, that's us, isn't it? Oh, we do that. Oh yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, you see, we have that problem. Of course. The problems are basically the same. Not spending time, too many people in operational roles, management roles, spending time doing things that add no value because they don't have the right information. One of the things I always used to say was, hands up who, from a business point of view, the first thing they looked at this morning was email. Every hand in the room will go up, right? And I'd say, okay, email's terrible, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest. I can put a red flag next to anything that's from my boss because I can put rules in there. But that might mean the first email says it's KK's birthday today. Don't forget drinks at 5. Well, I love KK and I want to go for drinks. But that's unfortunately not the most important message of my day. Now, okay, Copilot these days, don't forget, I didn't have Copilot back then, can pull out things. But what I want you to reach for first thing in the morning is a dashboard that's absolutely specific to you, your actionable information, your whatever you want to call it. Instead of reaching for email, you reach for this because you know it's going to tell you what's the top 10 things, some of which might have happened overnight. Your favorite customer, the systems might have gone down, or the lorry supplying them skidded off the road. I don't know. Who is it you've got to call first? Yeah, there is nothing worse than as a salesman walking into somebody's office and you're going to tell them all about our Shell's latest or this company's latest whatever. And the first thing they say is, hang on a minute, before you start, my delivery hasn't arrived and I'm letting my customers down. And where the hell is it? Well, hell, my mobile device should have been telling me as I was walking into the office, by the way, his latest delivery's delayed. It'll be due in 2 hours. Unfortunately, the lorry, I don't know, had a puncture or something, give our apologies, but I should be ready. And if I'm not ready, that's lousy customer service. It's lousy whatever service. And if we're not all playing off the same information, that's even worse, right? This was a bit of a mindset change. If I have contractors doing work for me, why aren't I sharing the service data with them of that piece of equipment? Oh, that's ask. Is it? Why don't we want to share it with them? Because at the end of every quarter, when we sit down with them as a procurement, they have one set of numbers, we have a different set of numbers. We argue about it, we don't really get anywhere. If we've been looking at the same set of numbers all month, we can have a proper conversation. We can be congratulating them on meeting targets and exceeding, or we can say, hey, what went wrong on this particular piece of kit or site or whatever, where it seems like it took a long time to get there. We can have we have to be more broad-minded that the business, particularly in these days of outsourced supply chains, manufacturing, you name it, we should be able to see an end-to-end piece of our business and what's going on.
Absolutely.
And again, there's quite often a mental blockage about doing that. Yes, there's security considerations. I get all that. But as a CIO, I should be going to the business, opening their eyes to the art of the possible.
Absolutely. You mentioned about the incentives changes the behavior. And some of not many examples, but at least a few, where the teams are incentivized based on the SLA achievement, the IT teams, and then what happens is, say they don't want to share the live dashboard, so because they want to take out A's and B's and exceptions. So it's like an adjusted SLA, which doesn't run the behavior.
Yeah, and let's face it, the SLAs are absolutely meaningless to the business. So I used to say to people, part of our heritage as we globalized was we did all these SLAs with the business about uptime and speed and latency. They couldn't give a damn, right? If I'm going in, I don't know, let's say to the head of retail, what he wants to know, global EVP of retail, is how much money did I make him or lose him in the last month? If I lose connectivity, say to the retail sites for payment in the UK at midnight on a Sunday, yes, it'll cost me money, but it's not going to cost me a fortune. Lose it at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, I could be costing him, I don't know, $10,000 a minute. Shell has something like 48,000 sites globally, 30 million unique customers a day, selling more coffee than Starbucks and McDonald's put together. Right, just as a stat for you, right? 200 billion litres of fuel a year. Now, these are numbers back from when I was there. It may have changed. If I screw something up in IT, the wrong thing up, or we get a cyber attack, you got major issues on these businesses. Yeah, Shell finishes refueling a plane somewhere in the world every 13 seconds. Now, you imagine the data I've got to make sure that happens, to bill it, to invoice it, to use that data to help us make better decisions, to have more meaningful conversation with the airlines, with the airports. But the business wants to know it in their terms. They don't give a damn about gigabytes or latency. It doesn't matter. Tell me, Craig, how did you help me make money last? And if I can explain that, suddenly, and this was the big change, I suppose this was the change in my tenure there, was the conversation flipped from cost to value, right? So I was very used to being a CIO and...
Cost center.
Yeah. You sit under finance and you're a cost center. And it always amused me. I used to liken it, particularly in some roles, where I would get called in once a month or once a quarter to present to the management team. And it always felt like they'd had a really tough day or 2 or 3 days. And they'd put me at the end of the agenda. And that was a bit of fun because they could have some fun kicking the CIO for an hour, right? That's a little unfair. I apologize for on that one. But I think some CIOs, about some of your earlier questions, do feel that way. They never get any thanks. All they get is beaten up because something failed or something. And you think about the scale of some of these operations, it's sometimes a miracle in my mind. It all keeps running as well as it does, right? But if you can change that conversation to a value conversation, my God, is that a different conversation? And that's when, in my time at Shell, and it was thanks to one of the exec team in the downstream. He was passionate about why isn't IT at the table? Yeah, there were 2 or 3 of them who were very supportive of, I had to get the right people back to, it's no good having someone who's going to bleep and gurgle in the corner. They've got, hence all the workshops and the training, they've got to become business savvy enough to be confident to sit there with business people and have a conversation and ask meaningful questions. I almost said they should be account managers, but that would have gone down badly, right? That had a connotation. But you think of the best account managers, the best account partners from some of the best consultancies, they know how to do this. And that's what I had to teach my people to be. You go in, you listen, you're curious. You don't offer solutions. You go away, you think about it. You come back with some thought leadership, with some best practice. You're becoming their friend, their colleague.
Absolutely.
All the things that I had to do as a consultant, I'm actually trying to teach now within the company. Because if we can do that and get trust and credibility, and behind the scenes we're building up the reliability, and we don't go in talking about us as IT, we go in talking about you as the business, back to my trust equation, hell, we're going to make progress. And we did. And that was the switch point when they started taking us seriously, asking us before they asked a consultant, listening to what we had to say. We didn't always get it right, but then neither did they. But that's where you have to get to. Then it becomes less of a grind and a stress. There's always stress in doing any big job, and I think a lot of people thrive on that anyway. But you could see you were making a difference, and you were being taken seriously, and IT was coming of age, and that's what's really important. And actually, if I go back to the Shell context now, the now global CIO, who was actually the guy who took over from me when I left, who's now global CIO of the whole shooting match, now reports to the CEO and not to the CFO. Well, about time, guys. Yeah, because if you're not on the same level as these other folks, yet the whole company relies on you doing your job right, not only keeping it safe, but driving it forward and being innovative, you kind of deserve to be at the same level and be given the respect that that commands.
Especially in an era where technology is driving every part of the business today.
Yes.
And today it has also become, to your point, account managers. Now they're called as business partners. In many of the IT, they have a business partner role, which is a business interface between the IT and interestingly rolls up to the IT, which is, I think, coming of the age of implementing those account manager concepts. Two more questions. You've been very successful. You played the role as an advisor after the Shell, and then you also now sitting on the board of many companies, being a strategic advisor and so on, which is pretty much many of the C-suite executives aspire to come to that. When do they start? How do they start? What is your advice for them?
Well, I think you start as early as you want to start in some respects. And by that, I mean, in your chosen career, it's important you build up your network. Sure. Again, I see in a lot of companies, people can get quite insular. And maybe there's a bit of arrogance about, well, we're one of the best companies in the world. I don't. But always throughout my career, I if someone said you want to come along and speak at this conference, some of my colleagues would say, well, why are you bothering? And I'd say, no, it'll be interesting. Or why are you going to that dinner? I chair CIO Net UK, right? It's about the network. You build up your network. You make yourself visible. And really at that level, in particular the last 15 years at Shell being a CIO, you should be comfortable at that level. You go along to learn, you go along to listen, but you also go along to network. I would often look at the invite list and decide whether I wanted to go more than what the topic was, because I would meet people who were further on in their careers than me. Absolutely. And you get interesting advice, you get mentorship, you get all sorts of things. So I would say it's never too early to learn. I think it's very important that you hone your public speaking skills. You should have no fear of going on stage or being on a panel where this is your specialist subject. You're not being asked to debate something completely outside of your whatever. No, right.
Global financial crisis.
Yeah, you're going on there to talk about what is your skill set and express an opinion. And I don't always say definitely my opinions are my opinions. They're neither right nor wrong. Hopefully somebody gets something out of hearing about my experience and goes, that's something I'm going to go try. That's something I'm going to do. So I think get yourself ready for these things. Get yourself known. It's important as well, if you get the opportunity to sit on a free, my first NED was, or my first advisory things, I still do a number of freebies. I chair the Institute of Coding.
Yes.
Very, very proud of that one. We've put over 1 million people from disadvantaged backgrounds through technical training. CIO Net, love that one. It's a thriving group of CIOs and senior IT people. Love it. People coming up through the ranks back where I was 10, 20 years ago, right? These are vibrant communities who all face the same issues. Yeah, going back to my earlier point, you come to one of our events, you'll hear, it's almost like going to CIOs Anonymous, right? They also go, well, I'm a CIO and I have to confess, because it's many are facing the same issues. And get yourself out there, get yourself known. Don't be afraid to do some, even if it's only sitting on your school board for your kids or doing something in your local village or town. It all looks good on your CV, because the danger is for being an NED, you come out of a big company and you've only ever been a manager, a leader. An NED is not that role. A strategic advisor is not that role. You're not doing it anymore. You're offering advice, you're offering guidance, you're asking the right questions to get the executives who are charged with doing it to think about the right things. It's a different role. And I think I was lucky because I'd done the KPMG bit. So I kind of understood that more. When people reached out to me, they said, we like the fact you've been a consultant, because we sometimes have problems with people who've only been in an industry all their lives because they tend to want to still do it. And obviously that's not the role. But practice and get known. Don't be insular. Take time, particularly if you're in a big city like London, Manchester, wherever. Once a month, go to one of these events. There's loads of events in the UK. I mean, there are across Europe, but if I just think about the UK, there's a lot of events. It's part of your professional development. And one day, maybe it seems a long way off to some people, but believe me, the years go past fast, it's going to pay off to you. Absolutely. Because normally it's not a headhunter who comes to you, it's somebody who reaches out to you and says, Craig, I've heard our company's looking for, would you be interested? Right? So don't be afraid to be known.
Fantastic. Last question.
Okay.
With all these years and so many roles, how do you feel about what is the accomplishment you made?
Well, I like to think I made a difference. I learned an awful lot on the way. The old adage of what got you here won't get you there. There were several times in my career I was lucky enough to be surrounded by very good people who helped me go to that next level. I think one of the hardest things for me at one stage, I think it was when I got the global trading and shipping role, was, somebody took me aside and said, look, you've got to stop wanting to be liked and want to be respected. God, they were absolutely spot on, because all of us want to be liked. But there comes a point where people are really watching what you do. I always tell people, you are a role model to somebody, not because you're necessarily a leader of anything. You can be a role model to your little sister. You can be a role model to your friend. You can be, at whatever stage you are in life, you can be a role model to people at your sports club. You don't always know, but learning how to conduct yourself, and I've got it wrong many times, learning what's important. I think getting your core values right so that you know when things are right or wrong in that professional world. But if I look back on it, I think I was trained well. I had good people around me. I think I did a pretty good job of my leadership. I was seen as a very people person. My door was always open to people. My secretary used to berate me all the time. She'd find people in my office and she'd say, well, what are you doing in Craig's office? Yeah, I actually sat outside of my office. I like to be with people, but I had a room behind, which was mine for use, right? And they'd say, oh, Craig said I could just drop by for 5 minutes. She'd go, where's he going to fit that in his diary? Because I know that when I started out, particularly when I started out, because of that hierarchicalness of Shell, it was very hard to get to anybody that senior.
True.
I never wanted to be a closed door to people. I wanted to give people time. I would discuss anything they wanted, Chatham House rules, whatever you want to call it, because that was important to me. I say, it's a Nelson Mandela quote, actually. If people should watch the film Invictus, it's one of it. There's a brilliant bit in the middle of it. I can't imagine it was all said like that, but it's a whole study of body language and humble leadership. So Mandela meets with Francois Pinoir, who's the captain of the Springbok. And I mean, you know the story,
Absolutely.
Right? They were no hopers sorry, spoiler alert, everyone. They go on to win the World Cup. But there's this lovely piece where he asks Francois Pinoir, what's your philosophy on leadership? Mandela said, I find when times are tough, leadership is about inspiring people to be better than they ever thought they could be. Just think about that. If I can go through life and inspire a few people, maybe family, maybe friends, maybe work colleagues, to be better than they ever thought they could be, geez, I've left the world a better place in some way.
Fantastic. Craig, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Absolute pleasure.
I couldn't imagine. The time ran so quick and so gripping, so much to learn from you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.
My absolute pleasure, KK. I probably spoke too much. That's you get me talking.
The whole idea is about hearing
Okay.
you
Right.
than, anything else. And it is an incredible conversation.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
I very much appreciate it.
Hello, listeners. If you loved the episode of CIO Diary, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share it with a fellow IT leader who would find Craig's story inspiring. Join us next time as we continue to uncover more human stories behind digital transformation.